The night was alive with shadows, but none so alive as the fear racing through Aria's veins. Each breath she drew burned her lungs, sharp and ragged, as though the very air conspired against her. Her legs carried her as fast as they could, stumbling over roots slick with rain, branches clawing at her face and arms like the forest itself wanted to hold her back. Every movement was a battle, one misstep, and the hunters she could hear closing in would tear her from the earth. Her arm throbbed violently where the jagged bark had slashed her flesh, blood soaking through her sleeve, warming her skin with every pulse. She pressed her palm to the wound instinctively, tasting copper as it mixed with the salt of her sweat, but she didn't dare stop. She couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever again. Thunder ripped across the sky, echoing through the skeletal trees, and for a moment, it sounded like the world itself was shouting at her, warning her of the chaos yet to come. Rain began to fall, cold and unrelenting, plastering her dark hair to her neck, soaking her torn clothes, but it was nothing compared to the storm thrumming inside her chest. She could feel it, a power buried deep within her, an ember of something ancient, sharp, and dangerous, thrumming with life she had never fully learned to control. It wanted to rise. It wanted to explode. And if it did, she feared the world would shatter around her. She stumbled, catching herself on a twisted root, and a sharp cry escaped her throat, more of frustration than pain, but the echo carried through the trees like a signal flare. Something, or someone, was coming. Heavy footsteps thumped behind her. Closer. Faster. She dared a glance over her shoulder, and in the flickering silver light of the moon breaking through the clouds, she saw them, figures moving with a precision that made her stomach twist. Hunters, or wolves? She couldn't tell, but it didn't matter. They were coming, and she had nowhere to run. Aria's ribs ached where she had fallen earlier, the wind stolen from her lungs in a moment of exhaustion, and she crouched behind a fallen log, trying to catch her breath without letting the sharp rise and fall of her chest give away her hiding place. The bark bit into her palms as she gripped it, the rough texture grounding her in reality even as the fear threatened to pull her into the swirling panic of her mind. "Not again, please, not again," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crash of the storm. The words trembled with every pulse of adrenaline. She didn't know if she said them to herself, to the shadows around her, or to the storm that had somehow come alive with her desperation. Her fingers dug into the mud beneath her, nails scraping the earth, clinging to it as though the forest itself would hold her safe. But it wouldn't. It couldn't. A shadow flickered across the edge of her vision, darting between the trees like a predator testing her courage. Her heart slammed against her ribcage so hard she could feel it in her throat, and the blood in her veins screamed, echoing the beat of a wild drum that seemed older than the world itself. Her wolf. The silent, untamed part of her, stirred. The dormant power she had kept buried, the fire that her old pack had feared, began to rise, hungry, impatient, and raw. Her vision blurred red, the world tipping on the edge of fire and shadow, and she struggled to push it back. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus. Focus on the here. Focus on the now. Focus on surviving another night. She pressed her back against the cold log, shivering from the rain, the chill biting into the small cuts along her arms and legs, the raw edges of her soul mirrored by the bruises that bloomed like dark flowers on her skin. Every sense screamed at her, sound, smell, sight, all sharpened to the point of agony. The rain-slick leaves carried the scent of her pursuers, metallic and earthy. The wind carried their whispered words, commands she didn't understand but somehow recognized as threats. Every snapping twig, every shift of the shadows, tightened the coil of terror in her chest until it ached with its own rhythm. And then, above the chaos, a sound that should have been impossible cut through the storm. A low growl, deep and resonant, vibrating in the air like a drumbeat in the chest of the world. Aria froze, her blood turning to ice in her veins, her entire body tensing as the hair along her spine bristled. It was not the hunters. It was not the forest. It was something else. Something dangerous. Something awake. Her pulse spiked, the wolf inside her roaring silently, desperate for release, clawing at the edges of her consciousness. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish. But she couldn't move. Not yet. Not until she understood what was coming. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, imposing, impossibly still despite the chaos around him. Every instinct told her to flee, yet her legs refused to obey. The rain slid down his broad shoulders, his hair dark as midnight, and his eyes, sharp and piercing, seemed to see through the layers of mud, blood, and fear. Kale. The alpha she had only ever heard whispers about, the one who rejected every assistant, every servant, every loyal soul who dared step too close. And yet, here he was. Watching her. Not with contempt. Not with judgment. Something else flickered there, buried beneath a lifetime of mistrust and savage survival. Something that made her knees weaken even as she gripped the log harder, the bark biting into her palms. Her heart raced, not just with fear, but with a curiosity she couldn't name. The wolf within her stirred again, sharper this time, the red haze creeping back into her vision, urging her toward him, warning her, tempting her. She could feel the pull of something older than the storm, something primal, something inevitable. "Arya," he said, voice low, calm, yet carrying a weight that pressed against her chest. It wasn't a question. It was a recognition, a claim, a challenge. He knew her name, her truth, the silent storm inside her. And even in this chaos, she realized he was the only presence that made the fire in her chest feel like it could burn safely. The wind howled, the thunder cracked, and rain lashed her face, but for a moment, the storm faded into background noise. All that remained was the pulse of her heart, the tremor of her wolf, the thrum of her fear, and the impossible understanding that nothing would ever be the same again. Arya's whisper caught in her throat again, softer this time, trembling with a mix of awe and terror. Not again, but, maybe this time, her words dissolved into the storm, swallowed by the night, carried toward him like a fragile, desperate offering. The shadow of a figure moved closer, and she tensed, the wolf ready to leap from her skin and tear through whatever threat remained. But it was not a threat. It was a savior, a predator, a man whose own demons were tangled around him like barbed wire. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The storm paused, just long enough for her to realize that this was the moment everything would change. That from this chaos, this fear, this near destruction, something new, dangerous, and intoxicating would rise. And before the world could pull her under completely, a final thought threaded through her mind, sharp and urgent. Before Arya's world turns upside down, make sure you're subscribed to Moonlight Mate Stories, where we bring you the deepest, rawest, most emotional werewolf tales under the moon. Because what was coming next? What lurked beyond the trees, beyond the storm, beyond her own fear, was only the beginning. The rain didn't just fall anymore, it screamed, hammering the forest floor, tearing through branches, drenching Arya until every muscle in her body screamed in protest. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each one a battle between panic and the pull of her wolf beneath her skin. She stayed pressed against the log, teeth gritted, eyes scanning the darkened trees for the shadow that had moved too fast to be human. Her hand trembled as it brushed the wet leaves, slick and cold against her skin, and she tasted the bitter tang of fear, metallic, raw, impossible to ignore. And then she saw him. At first, he was nothing more than a silhouette, cut sharply against the fractured silver light of the moon as it fought its way through angry clouds. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, to hide, to vanish into the chaos that surrounded her, but her legs refused to move. Something about him held her there, a magnetic force as tangible as the rain soaking her hair to her shoulders, clinging to her face and back. He was impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, and his presence filled the forest like a storm itself had taken human form. Alpha Kale Raven Shadow. The name whispered on trembling lips across every pack she had ever known. Feared. Admired. Untouchable. Dangerous in ways that had made even seasoned warriors falter. Yet here he was, stopping a mere step away from the clearing she had crawled into, not advancing, not attacking, simply watching. His eyes, amber and molten with fire beneath the storm, found hers, and something strange twisted in the pit of her stomach. Recognition? Curiosity? Something unspoken, impossible to name? Arya. The single word cut through the howl of the wind, the hammer of rain, the storm of her panic. Her head snapped toward him, heart stuttering, pulse spiking in a rhythm that felt like it might break her chest. He said her name softly, deliberately, as if the syllables themselves were a promise and a warning all at once. And yet she had never spoken it aloud near him. Never uttered a word that could betray her existence to the world beyond the shadows. And still, he knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. Her chest heaved, lungs straining, as if the air itself were conspiring to betray her. She pressed herself tighter against the log, muscles coiled, nails digging into the bark, but something inside her froze. Not fear. Not yet. Something else. Something sharp and inexplicable that left her blood tingling with anticipation even as terror clawed at her ribs. He stepped closer. Rain traced rivers down the planes of his face, plastering his dark hair to his skull, but he did not flinch, did not falter, as though the storm itself obeyed him. And when he reached her, his hand lifted with a deliberate gentleness that contrasted sharply with the power radiating from every line of his body. He brushed the wet hair from her forehead, then tilted her chin upward. She flinched, instinct screaming that this was dangerous, that she should strike, flee, vanish, but she didn't move. His amber gaze held her, not with judgment, not with malice, but with a scrutiny that made her bones tremble and her pulse quake in ways she had never felt before. Behind her, movement, the threat that had driven her into this chaotic forest, shifted with predatory precision. Figures emerged from the shadows, their shapes blurred by rain and darkness, their intent unmistakable. Hunters. Wolves. Creatures of the night with teeth and claws and an unyielding determination to claim her. And yet, in the space between fear and chaos, Cale moved. He didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He simply stepped forward, a predator among predators, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The shadows recoiled. Rain bent away from him as if invisible currents circled his form. His voice rang out, low and dangerous, a sound that carried over the storm, a command. The intruders faltered. A snap of a branch, a shift of the body, and suddenly, the hunters, the wolves, they were scattering. One after another, they dissolved into the night, unwilling, unable, incapable of facing him. Rain plastered their coats, mud coated their claws, and still he stood, a living monolith of controlled fury and simmering power. Not a single hair on his head moved out of place, yet every movement, every breath, was a threat they could not ignore. And still, he did not look away from her. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw herself into the shadows and vanish as she had done so many times before. But something inside her, the ember of the wolf she had tried to bury, the fire that had been feared and shunned, pulled her toward him. She wanted to collapse, to lean against him, to let the storm and the rain and the chaos take her, and yet she couldn't fully trust the man who had just saved her life. Not completely. Trust had been ripped from her years ago, along with every ounce of hope, every flicker of faith in anyone's protection. Yet there was something about him. A conflict. A tension that radiated from his every pore, as though he were fighting a battle she could not see, a battle she might not be meant to understand, but which somehow tethered them together in the eye of the storm. His eyes held questions, unspoken yet burning with curiosity. Questions she didn't want to answer, and yet could not ignore. The storm intensified, hammering against the trees, driving her pulse faster, but Cale's presence was the eye, the still point around which all chaos revolved. She could feel it in the quiver of her hands, the tremor in her jaw, the pulse of something wild just beneath her skin. He stepped closer still, the space between them narrowing with each heartbeat, yet he made no move to invade it, no sign of force, only intensity. She swallowed hard, tasting blood and rain and fear, and felt her wolf stir violently beneath the surface. It wanted freedom. It wanted release. It wanted the predator to meet the predator, the fire to meet the fire. And in that moment, the world narrowed to amber eyes and wet hair plastered to a broad chest, the sharp scent of him and the electric pull of power that was impossible to resist. Kale's voice broke the spell, low and magnetic, yet deceptively gentle. "You're not safe here." He paused, letting the words hang between them, a bridge of truth and warning, fire and restraint. "But I won't let them touch you." She flinched at the promise, at the intensity, at the way the storm seemed to bend around him, and yet, she didn't pull away. Not fully. Something deep inside, buried under years of fear and rejection, whispered that perhaps for the first time, someone had stepped into her chaos not to dominate her, not to consume her, but to hold space for it. The wind tore through the trees, the rain sliced across her face, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, the world seemed to narrow to the sound of their breathing, the beat of her wolf's wings beneath her skin, and the undeniable pull of something neither of them could name but both felt. "Arya," he said again, soft now, intimate, a tether in the storm. "Look at me." Her gaze met his, shaking but unbroken, and in that instant, she realized something impossible. She was not alone. She was not hunted. Not entirely. Not while he stood there, a wall of strength and fire, his own internal chaos mirrored in her pulse. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the raw, unspoken intensity that crackled between them like lightning in the storm. Fear, curiosity, and a strange, unfamiliar pull of attraction wrapped around her heart, twisting it in knots she had long since forgotten how to feel. Her wolf growled deep in her chest, and she almost laughed at the irony. She, the silent flame, tethered by nothing more than a human gaze. And as the shadows of her pursuers dissolved into the night, leaving only the distant echoes of fear, rain, and thunder, she realized something even more terrifying than the storm surrounding them. Something she couldn't name, but could already feel deep in her bones. Kale Ravenshadow had stepped into her world. And in doing so, he had changed it forever. The forest around them had not calmed, though the immediate threat had vanished. Rain still hissed against the leaves, wind whipped through the skeletal branches, and the night stretched into endless shades of gray and black, mirroring the turmoil inside Arya. She pressed her back against the log, arms crossed over her chest, and closed her eyes, trying to force herself to breathe evenly. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one thrumming beneath her ribs. She remembered the first time she had realized she was different. A flash of silver light in the middle of the training yard, her wolf erupting in a surge of forbidden power she hadn't known she could control. Smoke curling into the sky, the scent of burned earth, panicked shouts of those she had tried to call allies. The elders had been furious. Too dangerous, they said. Unstable. Broken. Words that branded themselves onto her heart like a scorch mark. Her wolf had been quiet, loyal, controlled, until it wasn't. The first time she had shifted partially in front of a pack elder, her claws had shredded stone and timber alike. A single mistake, a flicker of uncontrolled strength, and the entire training yard had burned, leaving a scar on the earth and a scar on her reputation that would never fade. She remembered their faces, the shock, the fear, the betrayal, and how quickly trust had turned to hatred. If they knew what lived inside me, they'd burn me. That thought repeated in her mind like a mantra. It had kept her silent, restrained, hidden. She had learned to bend, to serve, to follow. She had been an assistant to dozens of alphas, each one convinced they could shape her, each one casting her aside the moment she flickered too brightly, too dangerously. Every rejection had carved another layer of caution into her soul, a careful armor built from disappointment and pain. And yet, that same caution made every step, every glance, every heartbeat around Kale feel like walking a razor's edge. Kale. His name lingered in her mind like smoke curling through her thoughts. Rumors had followed him wherever he went. The council whispered that he was unfit, unstable, even dangerous. Stories of assistants sent away in fear, warriors struck down by his temper, wolves who had faltered under his unpredictable fury. Yet here he stood, the very image of dominance and power, and instead of striking or discarding her, he had saved her. His presence had been commanding, fierce, and yet there was a softness in the amber of his eyes that left her trembling. She opened her eyes slightly, glancing at him from beneath the sweep of her soaked hair. Cale didn't move, didn't pressure her, didn't demand her trust. He was a storm wrapped in human skin, yet around her, he softened, not completely, never fully, but enough that she could feel the difference. His wolf, brutal and untamed in reputation, simmered at his core with something curious, patient, attentive. It was impossible to reconcile with the rumors, impossible to ignore the pull it had on her own fractured wolf. Her fingers flexed, nails digging into her palms, as the memories came in shards, shattered homes, scorching fires, the echo of laughter turned to screams, whispers of banishment, threats whispered behind closed doors. Each memory was a weight she had carried alone, each one a reminder of the loneliness that had defined her life. She had never allowed anyone close, never risked being understood. Not fully. Not until tonight, not with him standing there, amber eyes holding hers in a silent, unspoken conversation. Why do I feel safe? The question surprised her, unbidden, almost laughable. Safe? How could she feel safe when she had been hunted, abandoned, and burned so many times before? And yet, with Cale, the storm outside seemed to fade into the background. The rain still hissed against leaves, thunder still cracked, but there was a strange quiet between them, a tethering, a fragile acknowledgement that for the first time, perhaps, she wasn't entirely alone. Her silver light pulsed beneath her skin, faint and shivering, like a heartbeat visible in the darkness. It was still weak, untested, and yet impossible to deny. She had kept it hidden, controlled it with every ounce of discipline she had, because she knew the consequences. A single misstep could destroy her, again. Could destroy anyone who dared come too close. She flexed her fingers, feeling the hum of power beneath her flesh, the promise of something untamed, forbidden, unclaimed. Cale's gaze followed her movements, steady and unyielding. He didn't flinch at the silver glow beneath her skin, didn't step back, didn't avert his eyes. Instead, his expression softened slightly, a shadow of something vulnerable peeking through his controlled mask. She caught the slightest exhale escape his lips, a sound almost like a sigh, as if he, too, understood the weight she carried. "Your wolf," he murmured, almost to himself. His voice was low, gravelly, yet carried a weight that made her pulse quicken. He didn't demand an explanation. He didn't question. He simply observed, and in that observation, she felt the first flicker of connection she had allowed herself in years. Someone who saw her, not the mistakes, not the fear, not the rumors, but her. The wind shifted, and rain lashed her face again, drawing her back to reality. The danger had passed, but the storm inside her remained, chaotic and alive. Memories of rejection and exile collided with the undeniable pull she felt toward him, confusing her, frightening her, and yet, enticing her. She realized that she had not allowed herself to be drawn to anyone in so long, not since the fire had claimed the training yard, not since the pack had tried to banish her for the very wolf she had learned to fear. Her internal monologue was a tangle of fear and desire, of vulnerability and instinct. Can I trust him? Should I trust him? He could be like the others, or he could be the first to see me for who I really am. Every thought tightened the coil of tension in her chest, her pulse hammering against the cage of her ribs. Cale took a step closer, and she felt it through every nerve ending, the draw of a predator, the intensity of an alpha, the raw, magnetic pull that had nothing to do with words. He didn't reach for her, didn't demand her submission, yet the space between them crackled with an electricity neither could ignore. She felt her wolf stir again, the silver light beneath her skin pulsing in response to his presence, her instincts screaming both warning and invitation. And in that moment, the truth of her life pressed down on her harder than the rain ever could. She had been rejected, abandoned, burned, and banished. She had survived only because she had learned to hide, to bend, to serve without being seen, to disappear when the danger came too close. Yet here, standing in the chaos of rain and storm and raw power, she realized that perhaps survival alone had never been enough. Perhaps someone dangerous, brutal, unpredictable, could see her. Could see the wolf, the fire, the silver flame beneath her skin, and not recoil. Kale's amber eyes met hers again, and in that moment, she saw not the alpha everyone feared, but a man wrestling with the same demons that haunted her, a man whose power was only matched by the walls he had built around himself. Rumors had called him ruthless, unfeeling, unapproachable. But now, seeing him here, she understood a fragment of the truth. He was complicated, broken in ways unseen, and yet somehow capable of grace in the midst of chaos. She swallowed, tasting blood and rain and the faint tang of fear, and for the first time in years, she let herself imagine something impossible, a future where she was not alone, where her wolf could breathe freely without judgment, where power and trust could coexist. The storm continued to rage around them, the forest alive with shadows, rain, and wind, yet within that circle of chaos, Arya felt a tentative, fragile spark. A spark of hope, of possibility, of connection. And in Kale's unwavering gaze, she glimpsed the faintest hint that perhaps, just perhaps, she was not meant to face the storm alone. The forest shifted as they walked. Rain had slowed to a misty drizzle, and a quiet hum of life whispered from the earth, from the roots and stones that thrummed beneath her feet. Bioluminescent flowers glowed faintly along the trail, their gentle light casting the trees in an otherworldly shimmer that made Arya's breath catch. Shadows twisted and danced in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost alive, as if the forest itself had been waiting for her arrival. Kale moved silently ahead, each step confident, measured, a predator who knew every route, every slope, every shadow. His presence, constant and unyielding, pressed against her awareness in ways she could neither resist nor fully understand. It was not just his power. It was the unspoken acknowledgement that she belonged somewhere, that she had a purpose beyond the endless rejection she had endured. And yet, the weight of that realization pressed down on her chest. Purpose, destiny, what if I am not meant to survive it? The path widened, and she glimpsed it, a shrine, ancient and untouched by time, nestled in a clearing bathed in the soft glow of the bioluminescent flora. Moss clung to stone, vines twisted around broken columns, and the air pulsed with an energy that was older than memory itself. The carvings along the shrine's walls made her pause. Figures etched into stone, wolves and humans intertwined, flames and shadows dancing in eternal struggle. One figure stood apart, an omega, head bowed, silver light swirling around her, power contained yet impossible to hide. Arya's chest tightened, fingers brushing against the worn stone as if grounding herself could keep her from falling into the vortex of memory and fear. The image stirred something deep in her, a flicker she had tried for years to smother. Her wolf shivered beneath her skin, claws pressing against the invisible cage that held her back. She could feel it, the call, the pull, the undeniable tug towards something she had been denied all her life. Kale's voice broke the reverent silence, low and measured, carrying the weight of centuries as he said, "This is why I brought you here. You needed to see it, to understand what you are." She turned toward him, eyes wide, voice caught in her throat. I don't understand. What is this?" He stepped closer, amber eyes reflecting the shimmering light around them, and for the first time, there was no predator or storm in his gaze. Only clarity. "It's who you've always been, Arya. The silent flame. The Omega with a power that has been feared and misunderstood for generations. This is why they rejected you, why they tried to hide you, why they thought controlling you, or banishing you, was the only way to survive." A tremor ran through her limbs, the words shaking loose memories she had buried deep, memories of fear, of isolation, of flames she couldn't control. Silent. Flame. Me? The silver light beneath her skin pulsed, responding to the resonance of the shrine, as if recognizing itself in the carved figures, as if whispering that she was not alone. And then she saw it, a vision, unfolding across the mist and glowing petals, more real than the air she breathed. A wolf, pure silver, made entirely of fire, stepped from the shadows, its eyes burning with a fierce intelligence, every movement fluid and impossibly graceful. It moved toward her, and the world around her fell away, the wind, the rain, the whispers of the forest, even Kale's presence, everything dissolved into the heat and light of that silver form. "You were not born silent," a voice whispered, soft as smoke and powerful as a storm. "You were silenced. Not by the world alone, but by those too afraid to see the truth of your power." Aria's knees buckled slightly, the air thick in her lungs, as if the voice had reached inside her chest and struck her heart directly. The wolf of silver fire stopped just a few feet away, eyes locking with hers, and she could feel the pull of its essence against her own, like two halves of the same soul finally acknowledging each other. Her wolf roared in her mind, claws scraping against the walls she had built for herself, demanding recognition, demanding freedom. Kale's hand found hers then, warm and grounding, yet firm, as if to anchor her to the present without diminishing the pull of what she was seeing. "It's time to understand, Arya. Your power is not a curse, it is a force. One that could shift the balance of our world. You were never meant to hide in the shadows." She shook her head, tears mingling with the rain and the glow of the shrine. "But what if I can't control it? What if it destroys everything? Everyone?" Kale's amber gaze softened, a flicker of vulnerability piercing the armor he wore for the world. "Control comes with understanding, with training, with trust. But the first step is acknowledging who you are. And you spent too long running from that truth. Too long silencing yourself. It ends tonight, Arya. It ends now." The silver wolf moved closer, and for the first time Arya felt its warmth. Not literal heat, but the essence of her own power reflected back at her, familiar and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She reached out instinctively, hand trembling, as though touching the fire itself might scorch her or save her, or both. The carvings along the shrine seemed to pulse in response, depicting battles, victories, sacrifices, and triumphs, all revolving around a figure like her, always the Omega, always the silent flame. And with each pulse, each flicker of light, the truth settled in her mind like a stone she had been carrying for years. She was meant for more than survival. She was meant to shape the world, even if that world had never been ready to accept her. Kale released her hand just long enough to brush a lock of wet hair from her face, amber eyes narrowing with intensity. "And I may be tied to this too," he admitted, voice low, almost a confession. "Not just as your guide, but as someone bound by the same prophecy. Someone who has been waiting for you, without knowing you existed. Someone who might not survive what's coming if you're not ready." The revelation hit her harder than any blow, harder than the storms that had chased her through forests for years. He was not just a savior, not just an alpha feared and respected by all, he was also part of the thread, the destiny that intertwined her path with the balance of their world. And if she failed, so might he. She drew in a shaky breath, silver light flaring beneath her skin in tandem with her heart. "So, this is it? My life, my power, my curse, it's all been leading to this?" Kale's eyes softened for the briefest moment, and she caught a flicker of what she had almost dared to hope, trust, maybe even something more. "Yes. But it's not just leading to destruction, Arya. It's leading to change. To balance. To the chance for you to finally claim what has always been yours, even if no one else ever understood it." The mist swirled around them, the forest alive with energy, and Arya felt it, the pull of destiny threading through her veins, pulling her toward a path she had spent years fearing, denying, hiding from. The silver wolf roared in her mind, not as a warning, but as a call to arms, a reminder of the strength she had never fully acknowledged. She stepped forward, trembling but determined, into the glow of the shrine, into the embrace of her power, into the destiny that had awaited her. And for the first time Arya felt more than fear. She felt purpose. She felt alive. Kale stepped beside her, silent and powerful, his gaze scanning the forest as though daring the world to challenge them both. And together, they faced the unknown, tethered by prophecy, bound by fire and shadow, ready to awaken a power that would shake the foundations of their world. The forest shifted as they walked. Rain had slowed to a misty drizzle, and a quiet hum of life whispered from the earth, from the roots and stones that thrummed beneath her feet. Bioluminescent flowers glowed faintly along the trail, their gentle light casting the trees in an otherworldly shimmer that made Aria's breath catch. Shadows twisted and danced in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost alive, as if the forest itself had been waiting for her arrival. Kale moved silently ahead, each step confident, measured, a predator who knew every route, every slope, every shadow. His presence, constant and unyielding, pressed against her awareness in ways she could neither resist nor fully understand. It was not just his power. It was the unspoken acknowledgement that she belonged somewhere, that she had a purpose beyond the endless rejection she had endured. And yet, the weight of that realization pressed down on her chest. Purpose, destiny, what if I am not meant to survive it? The path widened, and she glimpsed it, a shrine, ancient and untouched by time, nestled in a clearing bathed in the soft glow of the bioluminescent flora. Moss clung to stone, vines twisted around broken columns, and the air pulsed with an energy that was older than memory itself. The carvings along the shrine's walls made her pause. Figures etched into stone, wolves and humans intertwined, flames and shadows dancing in eternal struggle. One figure stood apart, an omega, head bowed, silver light swirling around her, power contained yet impossible to hide. Aria's chest tightened, fingers brushing against the worn stone as if grounding herself could keep her from falling into the vortex of memory and fear. The image stirred something deep in her, a flicker she had tried for years to smother. Her wolf shivered beneath her skin, claws pressing against the invisible cage that held it back. She could feel it, the call, the pull, the undeniable tug towards something she had been denied all her life. Kale's voice broke the reverent silence, low and measured, carrying the weight of centuries as he said, "This is why I brought you here. You needed to see it, to understand what you are." She turned toward him, eyes wide, voice caught in her throat. I don't understand. What is this?" He stepped closer, amber eyes reflecting the shimmering light around them, and for the first time, there was no predator or storm in his gaze. Only clarity. "It's who you've always been, Aria. The silent flame. The Omega with a power that has been feared and misunderstood for generations. This is why they rejected you, why they tried to hide you, why they thought controlling you, or banishing you, was the only way to survive." A tremor ran through her limbs, the words shaking loose memories she had buried deep, memories of fear, of isolation, of flames she couldn't control. Silent. Flame. Me? The silver light beneath her skin pulsed, responding to the resonance of the shrine, as if recognizing itself in the carved figures, as if whispering that she was not alone. And then she saw it, a vision, unfolding across the mist and glowing petals, more real than the air she breathed. A wolf, pure silver, made entirely of fire, stepped from the shadows, its eyes burning with a fierce intelligence, every movement fluid and impossibly graceful. It moved toward her, and the world around her fell away, the wind, the rain, the whispers of the forest, even Kale's presence, everything dissolved into the heat and light of that silver form. "You were not born silent," a voice whispered, soft as smoke and powerful as a storm. "You were silenced. Not by the world alone, but by those too afraid to see the truth of your power." Aria's knees buckled slightly, the air thick in her lungs, as if the voice had reached inside her chest and struck her heart directly. The wolf of silver fire stopped just a few feet away, eyes locking with hers, and she could feel the pull of its essence against her own, like two halves of the same soul finally acknowledging each other. Her wolf roared in her mind, claws scraping against the wall she had built for herself, demanding recognition, demanding freedom. Kale's hand found hers then, warm and grounding, yet firm, as if to anchor her to the present without diminishing the pull of what she was seeing. "It's time to understand, Aria. Your power is not a curse, it is a force. One that could shift the balance of our world. You were never meant to hide in the shadows. She shook her head, tears mingling with the rain and the glow of the shrine. But what if I can't control it? What if it destroys everything? Everyone? Kale's amber gaze softened, a flicker of vulnerability piercing the armor he wore for the world. Control comes with understanding, with training, with trust. But the first step is acknowledging who you are. And you spent too long running from that truth. Too long silencing yourself. It ends tonight, Arya. It ends now. The silver wolf moved closer, and for the first time, Arya felt its warmth, not literal heat, but the essence of her own power reflected back at her, familiar and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She reached out instinctively, hand trembling, as though touching the fire itself might scorch her or save her, or both. The carvings along the shrine seemed to pulse in response, depicting battles, victories, sacrifices, and triumphs, all revolving around a figure like her, always the Omega, always the silent flame. And with each pulse, each flicker of light, the truth settled in her mind like a stone she had been carrying for years. She was meant for more than survival. She was meant to shape the world, even if that world had never been ready to accept her. Kale released her hand just long enough to brush a lock of wet hair from her face, amber eyes narrowing with intensity. And I may be tied to this too, he admitted, voice low, almost a confession. Not just as your guide, but as someone bound by the same prophecy. Someone who has been waiting for you, without knowing you existed. Someone who might not survive what's coming if you're not ready. The revelation hit her harder than any blow, harder than the storms that had chased her through forests for years. He was not just a savior, not just an alpha feared and respected by all, he was also part of the thread, the destiny that intertwined her path with the balance of their world. And if she failed, so might he. She drew in a shaky breath, silver light flaring beneath her skin in tandem with her heart. So, this is it? My life, my power, my curse, it's all been leading to this? Kale's eyes softened for the briefest moment, and she caught a flicker of what she had almost dared to hope, trust, maybe even something more. Yes. But it's not just leading to destruction, Arya. It's leading to change. To balance. To the chance for you to finally claim what has always been yours, even if no one else ever understood it. The mist swirled around them, the forest alive with energy, and Arya felt it. The pull of destiny threading through her veins, pulling her toward a path she had spent years fearing, denying, hiding from. The silver wolf roared in her mind, not as a warning, but as a call to arms, a reminder of the strength she had never fully acknowledged. She stepped forward, trembling but determined, into the glow of the shrine, into the embrace of her power, into the destiny that had awaited her. And for the first time Arya felt more than fear. She felt purpose. She felt alive. Kale stepped beside her, silent and powerful, his gaze scanning the forest as though daring the world to challenge them both. And together, they faced the unknown, tethered by prophecy, bound by fire and shadow, ready to awaken a power that would shake the foundations of their world. The air changed the moment they crossed the boundary of Kale's territory. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches whispering warnings, and even the wind seemed sharper, slicing through the mist with a cold, accusing edge. Arya's steps were careful, each footfall hesitant, her muscles taut with anticipation, her wolf restless beneath her skin. The bioluminescent glow of the shrine had faded behind them, replaced by the harsh reality of the Packlands, a world that would not welcome her. They reached the clearing where the pack gathered, a semicircle of figures framed by flickering torchlight. Every eye turned toward them instantly, a wave of scrutiny and suspicion rolling over Arya like a physical blow. Murmurs rose, sharp and biting. Another assistant, one voice sneered, the tone dripping with derision. She's a rogue. She doesn't even belong here. Another added, venom lacing each syllable. She has no wolf. A third barked, the accusation echoing through the clearing, heavy with fear and disbelief. Arya felt her stomach twist. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, silver fire beneath her skin responding to the hostility. No wolf? They don't understand. They don't see the power beneath the surface, they never will. She took a shaky breath and tried to steady herself, but every muscle in her body screamed for flight, every instinct telling her she didn't belong. Kale's amber eyes scanned the crowd, sharp and unforgiving, his jaw tight. His wolf hummed beneath the surface, a low vibration that made the hairs on Arya's neck stand on end. Kale stepped forward, shoulders squared, radiating authority that both reassured and terrified her. He had brought her here, into the lion's den, knowing full well the backlash that would follow. And then he saw him. Darius Thorncrest, rival alpha and ever-looming threat, emerged from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. Broad-shouldered, wolf aura flaring, eyes glinting with malice, Darius's presence was like a strike of lightning cutting through the night. He had a reputation for brutality, for striking fear into allies and enemies alike. And now, he had found the perfect weapon, Arya. She is a danger, Darius's voice boomed, echoing across the clearing. Every word was deliberate, every syllable calculated to provoke and terrify. I won't allow an unstable Omega to walk freely on these lands. Kale, you know what must be done. Arya's hands trembled at her sides, silver light pulsing beneath her skin as her wolf stirred in panic and defiance. She wanted to speak, to argue, to make them see the truth of her power, but every glance around the clearing told her the pack was not listening, was not ready to understand. She felt trapped, cornered, exposed in a way that made every scar in her soul ache. Kale's eyes darkened, his wolf pressing against the cage of his humanity with barely restrained ferocity. She is not a threat to this pack, he said, voice low, dangerous, every word cutting through the murmurs. She is under my protection. Darius laughed, a sound like cracking stone. Protection? From what, Alpha? From reality? From yourself? You have no right to bring such a creature here. Do you understand what you are risking? She could burn everything, everyone, down with a flick of her wolf. The tension snapped. With a roar that shook the clearing, Darius lunged, claws extended, teeth bared, his wolf emerging in a blur of silver and shadow. Kale met him head-on, amber eyes flashing, fangs bared, the air between them crackling with power and aggression. They collided with the force of a storm, fists and claws striking, teeth snapping, the sound of tearing flesh and shattering bone echoing across the land. Arya froze, heart hammering, torn between fear and the desire to help. She stepped forward, hands glowing faintly with silver light, intent on using her power to protect Kale, but control eluded her. A surge of untested energy erupted from her, a pulse of silver fire that shot into the clearing, knocking several pack members off their feet and leaving scorch marks on the earth. Gasps and screams filled the air. The pack, once merely wary, now recoiled in outright fear. Eyes widened, whispers of unstable, dangerous, cursed cutting through the chaos. Arya's stomach twisted, guilt burning hotter than the silver flame she could barely contain. I can't control it. I'm a mistake. A disaster. Kale roared her name, amber eyes locking onto hers through the storm of chaos. Arya. Focus. Trust yourself. His voice was a tether, a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of panic. She took a shaky breath, trying to rein in the pulse of energy within her, trying to ground herself despite the fear, despite the pack's accusing eyes. Darius staggered back for a moment, snarling, before lunging again. Kale countered with brutal precision, every movement fluid and controlled, yet there was no hiding the strain in his muscles, the effort of containing a force as raw as Darius's attack. And through it all, Arya felt her wolf stir, not in panic this time, but in awareness. She could feel the rhythm of Kale's energy, the push and pull of danger and power, and something inside her clicked. She was not just a pawn, not just a threat. She was part of this fight, part of the storm, part of destiny that had led her here. But the pack, still recovering from the sudden burst of uncontrolled power, did not see her as an ally. Instead, they whispered, pointed, and accused. She will destroy us, one cried. She is not one of us, another hissed. Fear and misunderstanding filled the clearing like smoke, thick and suffocating. Arya's knees buckled under the weight of judgment and the residual energy coursing through her. Chaol, despite the fight with Darius, moved to her side with the precision of a predator guarding its mate. He caught her by the shoulders, amber eyes locking with hers, and for a heartbeat, the world shrank to just the two of them. You have to leave, he said, voice low, fierce, but with an unmistakable tremor of regret. Before dawn, or this pack will force me to make a choice I will not survive. They will not understand. They fear what they do not control. And tonight, they are too afraid of you to see the truth. Arya's heart constricted. Leave? After everything? After he saved me, after the silver fire that was mine, leave now? But even as she opened her mouth to argue, she felt the cold truth in his words. The pack's loyalty, their fear, their expectations, they were immovable, unyielding. Her presence endangered Chaol, and she could not, would not, let that happen. Her wolf whimpered beneath the surface, a low, pleading sound, begging for release, begging for confrontation, begging for connection. She pressed her hands to her face, closing her eyes against the flood of emotion, against the sense of exile she had known so well. And yet, in the midst of the despair, she felt Chaol's hand on hers, steadying, grounding, a promise without words. You will come back, he murmured, and she could hear the weight of certainty behind it. I will find a way. And when you return, we will face them together. But tonight you survive. That is all that matters. Arya's breath caught, chest heaving, as she nodded silently, understanding the truth she had tried to deny for so long. She was not yet ready to fight the world, not when it had already tried to burn her once. But she would return. She would return stronger. She would return with the silver fire unbroken, and Chaol would be there, waiting. The first clash had ended, but its echoes reverberated through her, through the pack, and through the threads of destiny that had brought her here. The world had fought back, the opposition had been fierce, and yet, something deep inside Arya stirred, a seed of defiance, of power, of purpose. And even as the pack demanded her departure, even as Darius's eyes burned with malice, even as the first hint of dawn threatened the horizon, she knew, this was only the beginning. Chaol watched her retreat, amber eyes sharp and unreadable, wolf growling beneath the surface, every muscle coiled with tension. He had been given an ultimatum, choose the pack, or choose the Omega. And though the world pressed in around them with fear, judgment, and conflict, one truth shone through the chaos, he would not abandon her. Not now. Not ever. Arya disappeared into the mist, her silver fire dimming but not extinguished, leaving the clearing scorched in emotion, suspicion, and the unspoken promise of a storm yet to come. Rain pelted the rocky entrance of the cave like a relentless drumbeat, cold and urgent. Inside, shadows clung to the jagged walls, flickering in rhythm with the meager fire Arya had managed to coax alive. She sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them, shivering. Not from the cold, but from the storm of everything that had happened. Her silver fire pulsed faintly beneath her skin, almost shy now, dimmed by exhaustion and fear, as if she herself wasn't sure whether to trust its power. The sound of footsteps on wet stone made her flinch. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to flee. And yet, she didn't move when the figure stepped into the flickering light. Chaol. Rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead, water streaming down the planes of his face, making his amber eyes burn brighter against the shadow. He didn't move to attack, didn't bark orders, didn't demand explanation. He simply stood there, as if the storm and the world outside had no claim over him at all. Arya, he said, voice low and roughened by concern. You shouldn't be here alone. You shouldn't be out in the storm like this. Her arms tightened around herself, shoulders rising defensively. I have nowhere else to go, she admitted, the words breaking free like shards of glass she hadn't meant to release. And even if I did, I don't know who would let me stay. Chaol stepped closer, crouching to the edge of the firelight, amber eyes softening. He didn't reach for her, not yet. Instead, he let her see that he understood without speaking, that he was here not as an alpha demanding obedience, but as someone tethered to her, drawn to her, willing to wait for permission to enter her space. The tension in the cave was tangible, thick as the mist outside, and every glance he cast her way carried a weight that made her stomach twist in ways she didn't want to analyze. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the hiss of rain and the soft crackle of fire. And then Kale spoke again, voice gentler now, almost confessional. I fire my assistants, all of them. Every single one. Not because they're incapable, because I can't trust anyone near me. Not after what I've seen. Not after what I've done. Arya blinked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. What did you do? His jaw tightened, a shadow crossing his eyes. Once, my wolf got loose. Nearly killed someone I swore I would protect. My rage, my power. I didn't control it. It's not something you just turn off. It's something that lives inside me, and sometimes, it doesn't care about anything but destruction. Arya's chest tightened. She had always known danger, had always carried the weight of her own untamed power, the fire she could barely control. And yet, hearing him confess, feeling the raw honesty behind his words, made something inside her stir. She wasn't alone in this. There was someone else who understood what it meant to hold chaos within your own skin, someone else who had been misunderstood, feared, and yet, survived. She shifted slightly closer to the fire, letting the warmth chase away the chill in her bones, but the real heat was the pull she felt toward him. The cave was small, the air heavy with rain and smoke and a tension that wasn't just physical, it was emotional, intimate, almost unbearable in its intensity. Arya's voice was barely a whisper. I lost my voice a long time ago. Not like this, not really. I stopped speaking after everything I went through. It was easier to stay silent. Easier to hide. Kale's eyes softened further, amber pools that seemed to reflect every shard of her pain and fear. He reached out, just enough for his fingertips to brush hers as they moved to adjust a log in the fire. The touch was electric, intimate without intention, and Arya's breath hitched. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the way it felt, like the first real connection she had felt in years, like recognition, like safety intertwined with desire. I see you, Kale murmured, almost to himself, almost as if confessing to the fire itself. I see all of you. Every part you think is broken, every part you've hidden, every flicker of power you try to bury. I see it. Her hands trembled, and she dared to look up, meeting his gaze fully for the first time since the cave had swallowed them both. It wasn't just understanding in his eyes, it was recognition. The recognition of something primal, unyielding, a wolf sensing another wolf in the shadows. A silent promise that he would not let her face this world alone. A near kiss hung between them, charged and dangerous. Arya's lips parted instinctively. Kale's jaw tightened, eyes fluttering with the unspoken war between restraint and surrender. For a heartbeat, the storm outside, the battle with Darius, the fear and rejection of the pack, they all melted away, leaving only this, the raw, undeniable pull between two souls who had been broken, who had been feared, who had been silenced, and now, finally, recognized by one another. Arya's voice trembled, fragile yet strong in its vulnerability. Why me? Kale's answer was a whisper, barely audible over the rain, yet it carried through the cave like a vow. Because you're the only one my wolf doesn't want to destroy. The words landed like a hammer, shattering walls she didn't even realize she had built. Silver fire pulsed beneath her skin, stronger now, not in fear, not in anger, but in recognition, acknowledgement. Her wolf exhaled through her mind, a low, contented growl that made her shiver and ache all at once. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be truly seen, truly accepted, truly desired not despite her power, but because of it. Kale shifted slightly, closer but careful, and the warmth from his body, the scent of rain and earth and wild wolf, wrapped around her in a cocoon of safety. His hand hovered near hers, then rested lightly on her knee. Not possession, not demand, but a tether, a reminder that she wasn't alone, that she had someone to lean on, to trust, to share this storm of chaos and destiny with. The fire flickered, shadows dancing across their faces, painting them as warriors, as survivors, as something more than human. The storm outside continued, relentless and unyielding, yet inside the cave there was a fragile, dangerous, intoxicating intimacy that neither of them had felt in years. "I trust you," Arya whispered finally, almost to herself, almost as a test. Cale's amber eyes softened further, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. "Then let me guide you," he murmured. "But know this, trust isn't easy. It's fragile. It's a gamble. And right now, you're my only stake." Her heart thudded in agreement, both afraid and exhilarated. She had been silenced, rejected, hunted. She had been fire and shadow all at once, feared and isolated. Arya's gaze met Cale's. No words were needed. He understood. She had claimed her destiny, she had embraced her power, and she had done so not just for herself but for him, for the pack, for every life that had been threatened by those who underestimated her. The battlefield was silent now, save for the gentle hum of silver fire fading into the night, smoke curling upward like a benediction. And yet, even in the quiet, there was an edge of danger, a reminder that the world would never fully comprehend, would never fully accept the silent flame. But Cale stepped forward, reaching for her hand, his wolf leaning close, recognizing the bond, the partnership forged not in weakness, but in shared strength, in trust earned through fire and struggle. She looked at him, heart racing, silver flames flickering across her skin like living armor. Her voice was softer now, but no less powerful. "I am not yours to command," she whispered, "and I am not theirs to destroy. I am, me." The moon rose high above, pale and patient, watching as the forest settled, as the ashes of shadow beasts cooled, as Arya, silent no longer, powerful, luminous, free, stood victorious, transformed, and untouchable in her sovereignty. Cale's hands found hers, and for the first time, the hesitation, the doubt, the fear of loss, all of it was replaced by awe, reverence, and a deep, undeniable bond that would endure beyond the fires of this night. And in that moment, the forest, the pack, the world itself seemed to bow before her, the silent flame fully realized, claiming not just power, but her place in the prophecy that had haunted her entire life. She was no longer a pawn, no longer hidden. She was fire, she was a wolf, she was destiny. And nothing, not Darius, not the council, not anyone, would ever make her bow again. The night air was heavy, thick with the scent of scorched earth and wet pine, yet it carried an almost sacred hush, as if the forest itself paused to watch. The silver flames around Arya's form flickered and danced, shadows stretching like fingers across the trees, reaching for the edges of the world. Her wolf, massive and luminous, padded beside her with measured steps, eyes gleaming with intelligence, instinct, and the raw, untamed essence of power that had once been forbidden. Cale stood close, his presence a tether in the storm of her transformation, yet his eyes betrayed a war waging inside him. Respect. Awe. Desire. Fear. Every emotion surged like a tide, crashing against the walls of his carefully guarded soul. He had seen the silent flame in fragments before, glimpses of silver fire and glimpses of the Omega who had no voice, who had always been dismissed, shunned, or feared. But now, fully realized, luminous, uncontainable. She demanded recognition not as an assistant, not as a pawn, not as anyone's property, but as herself. The pack, once murmuring in disbelief and suspicion, had fallen silent, their eyes fixed, some in awe, some in fear. They had watched the rise of something that defied their understanding, their rules, their rigid hierarchies. And in that silence, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next movement, the next choice, the next declaration that would tip the balance between hope and destruction. Arya's gaze swept across the clearing. Her eyes, silver and piercing, seemed to cut through the darkness, seeing not only the shadowed forest and the trembling pack, but the very fabric of destiny itself. She felt every heartbeat in the clearing. The trembling of those who feared her, the resolute strength of Kale beside her, the pulsing intent of the enemy who had not yet fled, and the whisper of the prophecy that had shaped her entire existence. Would you follow me, or fear me? The question arose not as words, but as an aura, a vibration in the night air, touching every listener, every witness, every soul present. She understood that power carried responsibility, that fear was natural, and that loyalty was never simple. The question hung in the air, shimmering in the glow of silver fire, twisting like smoke and wind. Kale stepped closer, his voice low, almost reverent, but with the force of certainty. They will choose, but they may not understand. His wolf growled softly, not in threat, but in agreement. Every muscle in Kale's body coiled as if preparing for the next onslaught, yet his focus never wavered from her. He had faced battles, rivals, and enemies countless times, but this was different. This was the rise of someone who could reshape the world with a single thought, a single act. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a whisper that seemed almost human, almost alive. Will you stand with her, or against her? The sound traveled like a living question through the trees, brushing against the ears of every being present. Even the shadow beasts that had survived fled into the night, cowed not by blades or fire, but by the radiance and authority of a power they could not touch. Arya felt the weight of that question press against her chest. Her wolf growled softly, brushing against her side, nudging, urging, reminding her that she was more than fear, more than pain, more than exile and rejection. She was the silent flame, and she had survived every attempt to break her. She had risen from betrayal, from fire and ash, and now she stood on the precipice of choice, not for herself, but for all who would follow her. Her voice, low and musical, cut through the lingering silence, a spark of light in the shadowed clearing. Do you think power makes someone invincible? She asked, not the pack, not the trees, but anyone listening, anyone choosing. Do you think fear can bind the fire inside me? I am not yours to control. I am not theirs to destroy. I am me. And if you choose to follow, you will see, and if you choose to fear, you will burn with what you do not understand. Kale's hand brushed hers, tentative yet grounding, a tether between human and wolf, alpha and omega, protector and fire. He did not speak, because words were unnecessary. The silver flame in her veins, the luminous wolf at her side, the way the forest trembled beneath her feet, these were her declaration. They were proof that she could not be ignored, could not be silenced, could not be bound. The pack shifted, uncertainty rippling through them. Some bowed instinctively, instinct and fear blending with awe. Others faltered, torn between loyalty to Kale and fear of the unknown, fear of something too powerful to comprehend. And the forest seemed to lean in closer, leaves rustling, bioluminescent moss glowing brighter as if the world itself recognized the gravity of the moment. Would you have chosen her? The narrator asked softly, lingering, almost hypnotic. Would you have run? Would you have hidden? Or would you have stepped forward into the fire, knowing it could burn you, yet knowing it could change everything? Her gaze found Kale's. In it, she saw trust, admiration, longing, and fear, not for her, but for what the world would demand of him. And in that glance, in that silent exchange, the truth was undeniable. Destiny was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. The ground quivered beneath them. Silver flame reflected in Kale's eyes, casting shadows across the forest floor. Arya's wolf let out a low, resonant growl, a sound that was both warning and promise, power and vulnerability entwined. Every sinew, every heartbeat, every breath was electric, charged with potential, tension, and a story yet unfinished. Is she the prophecy's hope, or its destruction? The narrator murmurs, each word deliberate, melodic, yet filled with urgency. Can love make her strong, or make her vulnerable? Can trust be her shield, or her downfall? A distant howl broke the tension, echoing through the mountains beyond the clearing, carrying a reminder of the wider world, the pack lands, the danger still lurking in the shadows. But it was not a threat to Arya. It was a challenge. It was the call of destiny, the call that demanded choice, courage, and recognition. Kale stepped closer, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. The gesture was intimate, charged, grounding in a world where the edges of reality blurred with silver flame and wolf fire. "Whatever comes next," he murmured, "you will not face it alone." The narrator's voice softens, lingering like a gentle wind across the night, "And now, dear listener, before you leave this world of moonlight and fire, before you close your eyes on the echo of silver and shadow, subscribe to Moonlight Mate Stories. Because here, every night, a new story awakens. Here, every story burns. And here, you will always find the pulse of destiny beating alongside the heartbeat of the silent flame." The wind shifted again. The fire flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the trees. The forest exhaled, as if acknowledging the choice that had yet to be made, the path that had yet to unfold. Every eye, every ear, every soul listening was faced with the same question: would you stand with her, embrace the fire, walk into the storm? Or would you turn away, shivering in the shadows of what you cannot understand? And in that suspended moment, with silver flames licking the edges of night, with Kale at her side, and the wolf kneeling before her, the forest held its breath, the pack whispered in uncertainty, and the prophecy trembled on the edge of becoming. Because she was the silent flame. And those who chose to follow her would never, ever be the same. The moon hung low in the sky, pale and distant, its light spilling through the misted canopy in ghostly ribbons that shimmered against the damp forest floor. Arya moved with deliberate grace, the silver flames along her skin now a gentle glow, tamed but still pulsating with undeniable life. Her wolf padded silently at her side, massive and luminous, every sinew coiled with latent power, every breath synchronized with her own. Each step she took left an imprint not in the soil, but in the air itself, as if the forest remembered the passage of one who was both feared and revered. Kale walked beside her, his hand brushing the small of her back now and then, guiding, steadying, grounding. His wolf trailed slightly behind, ears alert, eyes scanning the darkness, protective but respectful of the energy that radiated from her. Neither spoke, yet the silence between them thrummed with unspoken words. Trust, vulnerability, curiosity, and something far deeper, a connection that had been forged in fire and blood, betrayal and redemption. The forest seemed to breathe around them, leaves rustling with a soft susurrus, water dripping from branches, and the faint echo of distant waterfalls carrying a melodic undertone to their journey. Shadows danced like phantoms, flickering with each pulse of her silver light, casting strange, elongated shapes across moss and stone. And somewhere beyond the trees, a distant howl, a challenge, a question, a warning, sliced through the night, reminding them that peace, if it could be called that, was temporary. As they reached a clearing, the wind shifted suddenly, cold and sharp, carrying with it a vibration that was almost imperceptible but unmistakable. A crack opened in the sky above, a jagged fissure of dark clouds slicing across the silvered moonlight. It pulsed with faint, otherworldly energy, as if the heavens themselves were aware that the balance of power had shifted, that the world had tilted on its axis. Arya's gaze rose instinctively, eyes narrowing, senses alert. The wolf at her side growled low, resonant, a sound that shook the underbrush. And then, the voice came, not from any creature, not from any mortal being, but from somewhere beyond time, space, and understanding. It was a whisper, slow and deliberate, curling through the trees like smoke, curling into the air like a fog of destiny. She is not the only silent flame. Arya's chest tightened. Her silver flames flickered, responding to the words, rising, and falling like tides. Her wolf's hackles rose, not in fear, but in recognition of the warning, the prophecy, the challenge. Somewhere deep inside her, the part that had always feared her own strength, that had hidden from a world that never understood, stirred with tension and anticipation. She was no longer alone in her destiny, but neither was she free from the dangers it carried. Kale's hand found hers instinctively, firm, grounding. His voice, low and filled with both awe and concern, cut through the whispering wind. "You hear it too," he said, more statement than question. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, highlighting every line of worry, every flicker of fascination. "Something else is coming, something that could rival even you." Arya's eyes narrowed. Her wolf growled again, a deep, rumbling echo that vibrated in the bones of the earth. Every nerve in her body thrummed with the knowledge that this was not the end. The night had given her power, clarity, a taste of triumph. But it had also left a promise, a warning, etched into the wind, whispered through the trees, resonating in the ground beneath her feet. She was the silent flame, but the world, the prophecy, the balance of all things, was far from settled. The forest seemed to respond to her thoughts, shadows lengthening, bioluminescent moss flickering like 1,000 tiny eyes watching, waiting, remembering. Even the distant mountains trembled faintly, as though the earth itself recognized the weight of what had been awakened. The air vibrated with tension, pregnant with the possibility of disaster or triumph, and in that vibration, the first spark of curiosity, fear, and hope began to stir in the hearts of all who would witness the next chapter. A rustle in the underbrush made Arya stiffen. Kale's wolf leapt forward, powerful and alert, but nothing emerged. It was not a threat, at least, not yet. It was a reminder, the world was alive, watching, calculating. Every shadow could be friend or foe, every whisper of wind could carry a message, and every step forward could lead to revelation, or ruin. Arya's gaze fell to the horizon, where the sky seemed to fracture again, faint streaks of crimson bleeding into the silver. She could feel it in her bones, the presence of another, a power that mirrored her own yet carried its own weight, its own intentions, its own destiny. The silent flame was not singular. She was part of something greater, a lineage, a force, a prophecy that stretched beyond the borders of the forest, beyond the pack, beyond the very world she had known. Kale's voice broke the silence, softer now, almost reverent. "We survived what no one else could, but this," he gestured to the trembling fissure in the sky, the whisper of the prophecy, "this is only the beginning. The true Alpha has yet to rise." Arya's pulse quickened. Her wolf shifted slightly, luminous for bristling, eyes reflecting the jagged light of the torn sky. Every instinct, every power that had been suppressed, every shard of silver fire that had nearly destroyed the world in her hands, surged forward, acknowledging the presence of something, or someone, equally formidable. The prophecy was not her alone. Her power was a key, but the lock had more than one guardian. The clearing fell silent again, but it was not peace. It was the calm before the storm. Even the air seemed charged, electric with the promise of coming challenges, of battles unseen, of forces yet untested. Arya and Kale stood together, side by side, hands brushing, wolf at her side, fire in her veins, power thrumming through every pulse. They were a force to be reckoned with, yet they were not complete, not unchallenged, not finished. "She is not alone," the narrator's voice murmurs, slow, deliberate, each word reverberating like a heartbeat across the darkened forest. "The flames have awakened, and now the world waits. Waits for the next spark, the next choice, the next confrontation that will decide who stands, and who falls. The silent flame walks, but she is no longer the only fire." Arya's wolf sniffed the air, ears twitching, muscles coiled. Kale's wolf mirrored him, a perfect shadow of his alpha, alert and vigilant. Together, they faced the horizon, the crack in the sky, the whisper of destiny, knowing that whatever came next would test not just strength, but trust, loyalty, courage, and the unyielding bond that had formed between them. The wind picked up, carrying with it a faint, almost melodic whisper, "Prepare, for the balance shifts. Prepare, for the fire that is not alone." It was neither threat nor promise, it was inevitability. And as Arya lifted her chin, silver eyes reflecting the fractured moonlight, she understood, this story was far from over. Her journey, her power, her choices, they were the beginning of something far larger than any one pack, any one forest, any one night. Kale's hand tightened around hers, a silent vow, a tether of trust. And in that connection, the forest seemed to pulse in agreement. Every shadow, every tree, every flicker of distant fire mirrored the tension, the anticipation, the promise of what was to come. The narrator's voice softens, lyrical, almost hypnotic, and so, dear listener, as the moonlight bathes the forest in silver, as the fire of the silent flame flickers in the shadows, as the wolves kneel before a power yet to be fully understood, remember this. This is not the end. The silent flame walks, but she is not alone. The true alpha has yet to rise. And when the next story unfolds, will you be ready to stand with her, or will you be left in the shadows, trembling at the light you cannot hold? The wind whispered through the trees one last time, carrying the echo of power, destiny, and the unfinished story. Silver flames danced and faded, leaving traces of smoke in the crisp night air. The fissure in the sky lingered, a promise of upheaval, a crack in the veil of what was known and what was yet to come. And as Arya and Kale vanished into the horizon, the forest exhaled. Shadows stretched. Wolves howled. The prophecy waited. The world held its breath. And moonlight made stories, awaited the next chapter, where fire, fate, and love would collide once more. The night was still, almost reverent, as if the world itself held its breath. Arya stood at the edge of the sacred grove, silver flames along her skin softening into a gentle glow. Her wolf crouched at her side, luminous and magnificent, yet calm. The battlefield behind them had fallen silent, the shadow beasts vanquished, the enemies defeated or scattered. Kale approached slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. His presence was steady, grounding, yet every step carried the raw tension of unspoken emotion, the weight of battle survived, and the hope of something unbroken between them. You could have lost yourself, he said, his voice low, almost trembling, betraying a vulnerability he rarely allowed the world to see. I nearly did, Arya admitted, her voice quiet but strong, finally owning the words she had hidden for so long. But I'm here. And I'm not running anymore. Kale reached for her, his hand brushing hers, fingers entwining. His wolf settled, bowing its head before her, acknowledging her power, her strength, her right to stand here. For the first time, the world seemed to bend not around fear, but respect. You're more than the silent flame, Kale whispered, lifting her chin gently, their eyes locking. You're the fire that chooses who it burns, and who it saves. A small smile curved Arya's lips, a mixture of relief, pride, and something tender that had been denied for too long. She stepped closer, letting herself feel the warmth, the safety, the understanding that had been absent her entire life. Kale's hand rested against her cheek, thumb brushing lightly. I've been afraid, of losing anyone, of losing myself in the chaos. But with you, I'm not afraid anymore. Arya's silver flames pulsed slightly, as if acknowledging the bond they had forged. And I'm not afraid to fight, or to love, she replied. The moonlight touched them, bathing the clearing in a soft silver glow. The trees whispered with the wind, the forest alive with quiet approval. Wolves emerged from the shadows, bowing in silent respect, no longer seeing her as a weapon, but as a force of balance and courage. Kale lowered his forehead to hers, the moment intimate and electric. Together, he murmured, we're stronger than anything this world can throw at us. Arya nodded, her heart finally unburdened. Together, she echoed, knowing that for the first time, she had a home, a purpose, and someone who understood the fire inside her. The prophecy, once a whisper of fear, had become a promise of hope. The silent flame was no longer a shadow to be feared, she was a light, a force of change, and, for the first time, a woman who could choose who she protected and who she trusted. As the dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gold and pink, Arya and Kale stood side by side, wolves at their feet, hearts aligned. The battles they had faced were over for now, and though the world beyond still held challenges, they faced it together, unbroken, unafraid, unstoppable. Kale tilted his head, a playful smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. I think, we make a good team. Arya laughed softly, the sound like wind through silver leaves. The best, she agreed. And as the first light of day touched the sacred grove, the forest seemed to sigh in relief. The silent flame had been claimed. Not by fear, not by prophecy alone, but by love, courage, and the choice to embrace her power and heart fully. The story didn't end in chaos or heartbreak, but in hope and triumph. And in the quiet strength of their bond, every reader could feel it. Love can heal, fire can protect, and even the most silenced heart can roar louder than the fiercest storm. The wolves howled, a chorus that echoed through the mountains and valleys, carrying a promise. A new era had begun, and Arya, the silent flame, was ready to shine.